time in nearly 60 years, a Syrian president has arrived in New York to address the United Nations General Assembly. According to Reuters, the last time this happened was in 1967 when Nuruddin al-Atassi represented Syria. Today, the man at the podium is Ahmad al-Sharaa, a figure whose rise to power is as dramatic as it is controversial.
I guarantee to bring to justice all those who have the blood of the innocent on their hands.
But who exactly is Ahmad al-Sharaa? Why does his appearance at the UN matter? And why do world powers, especially the United States, remain cautious about embracing him? Ahmad al-Sharaa's presence in New York is being described as a historic return of Damascus to the international stage. Only 10 months ago, Syria was still under the control of Bashar al-Assad. But a lightning offensive in late 2024, led by forces loyal to al-Shara, toppled Assad's decades-long rule. His visit to the UN is more than symbolic. Analysts say he is here to push for further sanctions relief, to seek international investment, and to present himself as the legitimate leader of a new Syria. But for many, the bigger question is, can the world really trust him? Ahmad al-Sharaa was born in 1982 to a Syrian Sunni family. He spent part of his childhood in Saudi Arabia before moving to Damascus. Neighbors recall him as a quiet, bookish young man. But by his 20s, he disappeared across the border into Iraq just before the US invasion in 2003. There, he joined insurgent networks that would eventually form Al-Qaeda in Iraq. According to Time magazine, US forces arrested him in 2005 in Mosul during an operation against terrorists planting roadside bombs. He spent years in prison, often using a false name, before being released in 2011. And just weeks after his release, the Arab Spring protests erupted in Syria. Seizing the moment, al-Sharaa returned home. With financial help from a former prison acquaintance, who was none other than Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi, who would later lead ISIS, al-Sharaa set up a new faction inside Syria. That group became known as Jabhat al-Nusra or the Nusra Front. This link to Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi is one of the most troubling aspects of his story. Baghdadi reportedly provided al-Sharaa with funds to expand operations in Syria. The Nusra Front quickly gained notoriety in 2012 for suicide bombings and strict Islamist rule in areas under its control. But within a year, a major split emerged. Baghdadi announced the creation of ISIS and demanded Nusra fold into his so-called caliphate. But al-Sharaa refused. Instead, he pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda's central leadership under Ayman al-Zawahiri. This break with ISIS eventually defined his path. While Baghdadi pursued a global jihad, staging attacks from Paris to Cairo, al-Sharaa repositioned his forces as more focused on Syria itself. Still, the connection to Baghdadi lingers, which is a reminder of his origins in the same violent networks. Over time, al-Sharaa sought to rebrand himself. In 2016, he announced that his group was no longer part of Al-Qaeda. 1 year later, he merged with other factions to form Hayat Tahrir al-Sham or HTS. According to the Washington Institute, HTS was designated a terrorist organization by Washington in 2018, a label that stayed in place for years. Yet, as the Syrian civil war dragged on, HTS grew stronger in the northwest. And by late 2024, al-Sharaa launched his decisive offensive. Within weeks, Assad's forces collapsed. On December 8th, rebels entered Damascus. Bashar al-Assad fled to Moscow, and by January 2025, Ahmad al-Sharaa declared himself president. Since taking power, al-Sharaa has invested heavily in international diplomacy. He met US President Donald Trump in Riyadh in May and French President Emmanuel Macron in Paris shortly after. Saudi Arabia, Turkey and Qatar quickly re-established relations with Damascus. Trump even described him as a tough, attractive guy, signaling a dramatic shift in Washington's tone. In July 2025, the US State Department went further. It removed HTS from its list of foreign terrorist organizations and lifted the $10 million bounty once placed on al-Shara's head. This was a remarkable turnaround. A man once branded a terrorist was now sitting at the same table as world leaders. But under all this buzz lies a darker story. Human rights groups and UN reports accuse forces loyal to al-Shara of committing atrocities against minority communities, including the Alawites and Druze. According to AP News, a coastal uprising earlier this year left as many as 1,500 Alawites dead in crackdowns. In Suweda, a Druze majority region, his forces attempted to impose control, but Israel intervened militarily, forcing a withdrawal.
Israeli strikes and attacks against my country continue since December 8, contradicting the international support for Syria and threatening new crisis in an attempt to exploit the transitional phase, which exposes the region to being dragged into a cycle of new conflicts that no one knows where it will end.
Israel, meanwhile, views Shara with suspicion and has warned it will act if his forces threaten its borders. Domestically, Syria remains fractured. Kurdish-led forces still control the northeast, while Druze areas in the south demand autonomy. The upcoming parliamentary elections scheduled for October are already being criticized. Most seats will be chosen by electoral colleges rather than direct popular vote, and one-third will be appointed by al-Shara himself. Analysts warn this raises fears of a new authoritarianism. For Washington, the stakes are high. By engaging al-Shara, the US hopes to counterbalance Russia and Iran's influence in Syria. According to foreign relations experts, this is less about personal trust in al-Shara and more about strategic positioning in West Asia. Yet, critics argue that working with a former extremist undermines America's credibility in the fight against terrorism. They warn it could send the wrong message that leaders with jihadi pasts can be forgiven if they become geopolitically useful. At the same time, Syria's reconstruction needs are enormous. Years of war and sanctions have devastated the economy. Al-Shara is expected to use his UN platform to appeal for sanctions relief and billions in international aid. Whether he secures that support depends on whether world powers believe he can truly deliver stability. Ahmad al-Sharaa's visit to the United Nations General Assembly marks Syria's dramatic re-entry onto the world stage. But it also raises difficult questions. Can a man with such deep jihadi roots transform into a credible statesman? Can he win the trust of minorities inside Syria, or will his presidency be remembered as another chapter in Syria's cycle of dictatorship? For now, the world watches closely. That's all in this edition of Connecting the Dots. We will see you next week with more raging issues. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us in the Delhi newsroom. This is Munmun Bhattacharya signing off. Take care and stay safe.